Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Dave Peck and I'm a landscape photographer. I've got quite an extensive amount of content now on YouTube, so go and have a little look and hopefully you'll enjoy some of that. It's all landscape photography related. So this week's video is a little bit different. I'm normally on location and I will be in a second. Just want to jump in though and tell you what the video is about, because the idea of this week's video is I'm going to go onto location. I'm going to talk you through a shoot, and it's a shoot that I've been to before, photographed many times. You'll see it, actually you can see it on the screen there. It's a place called Willie Lott's Cottage in Flatford, and the good thing about going to a familiar location is the fact that you know how long the journey is going to take, you know where to park, you know where to walk to and where to shoot from pretty much. Which allows you a little bit to pre-visualise, which can work in your favour, can be a good thing to do. It's sometimes actually quite nice not to have that, so I've just been to the Lake District to put myself in a location that I've not been to before, just to see how my creative process works and what I can get out of it. So that's quite interesting as well. But this particular one I thought was going to be quite easy, but it turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I thought. And I left the location. Normally it's in the bag. I do all of my work in the camera, and I know when I get into Lightroom, which is my processing software, I just have to just tweak it a little bit and it's done. This particular one I've left and I still wasn't very happy with it, and I couldn't work out why. The shoot was good, didn't need abandoning. Sometimes I would just dump it, so that's just been rubbish. It should have been a really good shoot, but creatively I found it really difficult. So I'm going to jump in after you've seen me on location shooting the image. I'm going to jump into Lightroom, take you in there with me, and we'll have a look at how the shot develops. I genuinely have no idea what's going to happen. So we'll do all of that, and then what we'll do is we will print the picture, which I can then put on my wall. You can see I've started to print stuff off because my printer is now fixed. So that's the plan. Let's go over to me now over at Flatford and Willie Lott's Cottage on location, where you'll hear the alarms going off, and then it's gone, and you can watch me struggle a little bit with the composition.
Good morning. I was going to start off by saying welcome to one of the most peaceful scenes in East Anglia. But as you can hear, the alarms have all gone off, and they were off when I arrived, which is about half an hour ago. But I'm hopefully going to block that out. I'm going to try some isolation on the video, so hopefully you won't hear it too much. But
I'm going to move that way in a second, but I just want to show you this. Now this is, let's just move the camera that way a bit. This is Willie Lott's Cottage. Well, it's called Willie Lott's House, but I call it Willie Lott's Cottage. And this was the scene of the haywain that John Constable painted, and we're just before sunrise. Got another 10 minutes, so I'm going to wait here because I've not got a decent sunrise shot of this ever, and the clouds are looking quite good today. So if I can put up with the noise, I'm going to shoot it. In the mill pond here, and you can see it's changed a lot since Constable's day. This is flooded a little bit more, and this looks very different in the spring. It's a really nice spring shot. I shot this a few years ago, which is still hanging up in my hall. And that's what it's like in full summer. But here in winter, everything's frozen. And what I'm looking at with this picture, if I can just show you in my hand, I'm looking at this leading line which is caused by the ice. So I've set the camera up. It'll play around with that, and I'll come back to you when the composition looks good. Got the camera pretty low, as you can see. I've got a couple of grads on the top because it is quite bright, but I'm hoping that once the sun's up, these clouds are going to light up, and they're moving across. There's some nice fluffy clouds actually, and we'll get some light underneath there. We might get a decent sky, a decent image. Right, I'm going to turn this off because this is doing my head in, but that's the way it goes. Okay, so we've got that line of the composition coming down from one of the thirds, from the right-hand third there. I don't mind that so much. It's got more balance to it. So the ice starts there, goes around almost into the centre, and then back out to Willie Lott's. So that bit of the image is fine. I've got the top of the branches in, which I can crop around with later. I don't have to have those in. Obviously, that's where the sky is. You can see it's
the exposure is quite bright, and we've still got another 5 minutes to sunrise. But actually, this left bank is the problem. So there's dark in here, which I can lighten up in post-processing in Lightroom, and this bit here is still interesting. I've got a polarizer on the top as well, on the front, just to try and remove any glary areas. I mean, this bit down the bottom right here is really bright, so what that will do, the polarizer just darkens that down. It almost gives a bit of a vignette, but it also increases the saturation. So the sun is just exactly where I'm focusing. So we've got those flashing highlights are overexposed. If I look at the histogram, there's a little bit there, but actually I think, again, as I've said before, with a raw file, the GFX will cope with that. So let's shoot one now. The clouds are moving quite quickly. Good. Let's have a look at the picture. Okay. Okay, quickly. I found a slightly better composition. Let me just shoot it by moving about 2 feet that way, which is hardly anything, but it just didn't quite look right to me before, but now it does. So it's now past sunrise. There's no spectacular colour in the sky, but I suspect that's probably because there's some clouds over the sun or over the horizon, but it could just clear up. I mean, you can see now it looks brighter. Even the Woolly Lots cottage is lit up a little bit more, so the kind of peaches and very, very soft cream colour of the house is now showing up. Before it was a bit more black and white. So there's definitely some light about. It's breaking up a bit more. Look, I think we might have got a bit more colour coming through, actually. Well, this alarm is really getting on my nerves, so I'm going to shoot this. What I'm going to do is I'll put these on the screen back at the office, and we'll have a look at them together. We'll go through that. I'll process the files, and we can have a little look at what we've got.
So not as easy as I thought it was going to be, and I came away from that shoot not really happy with anything on the back of the camera. So I'm now going to go into Lightroom and I'll talk you through the process. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom. Just bring this back up. Gone into the develop module, and I've picked out 5 different images from the morning. So we've got that one and that one, a portrait, another landscape, and another portrait. So let's see if we can narrow this down. This is the one before sunrise. So quite like. What I don't like about it, let's just get rid of that actually. Just click on there. What I don't like about it is there's not an awful lot of light on Willie Lot's cottage itself. Looks fairly clean. We could definitely lighten it up. What I would probably do with this is darken down the sky and then lighten the whole thing up. That composition is very similar, just slightly further with the house to the left, so we've more got it where the hay wain was. Constable cropped his kind of there, didn't he? And had that kind of bit of the scene. Then we've got this portrait version, which is a lot brighter. Not sure like the feeling of that one. That's quite nice. It's got a heavy sky, which is how it was, as you saw from the video. And that one's got quite a light sky as well. I don't like that one, so I'm going to remove that from the collection. I've still got it on the external hard drive. So we're now down to 4. First of all, which ones do I like? I think I generally normally go for the ones before sunrise, but that one I think is possibly too much of this fencing, so I'm going to remove that one. We're now down to 3. How exciting. So that bright one, and we've got these 2. Same with that one actually, although I might just crop that off. This actually might suit a square crop. Now that one I've got, what I don't like about that one is that's where the eye starts, and that's right in the, and in fact that chimney pot there is right in the middle of the composition. I think the house would be nice in the middle of the composition, but I'm not sure about that chimney pot there, and I'm definitely not sure about that ice. So what we can do to get rid of that, we're going to crop this, and I think this might work quite well as a square. What I'll do, I think, is to put Willie Lot's house now roughly in the middle of the composition. I think with a square it probably does work to have everything sort of central, and it's then therefore symmetrical. So we've got a little bit of overexposure in the sky. So the first thing, or the next thing that I'm going to do, let's just get rid of this marker, is find the sky. And these auto masking things that we get in, that we've got now in Lightroom, are amazing. Oh, there's a little bit here. Just need to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of that with a brush. Don't want it affecting that part of the house. I'm just going to clear the roof to make sure that's okay. Okay, so that's just the sky selected. So now what I'm going to do is just come down on the exposure. I could actually just bring down the highlights, to be honest, because those are the bits that are burning out. Okay, that looks okay. Get rid of the mask. Now what I've got is a selection of the whole thing. We're just going to lighten it up a little bit, just a touch. So that looks better compositionally. I've got what's quite nice about it is we've got, as I said earlier, this nice line here, and that bit actually works quite well that side. This bit here looks a bit dark, which is the opposite side, but we've got the sun there, and that's kind of framing nicely the house like that. Okay, so bottom of the image on the left, we've got some nice grasses, nothing on the right. But what I'm going to do is add a vignette, I think, just to darken that down a little bit. I've got some stones to get rid of. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to say that composition's fine because I quite like it. We're just going to add a little bit of clarity to this to give it a bit of punch. I quite like using the clarity slider. It also has that kind of gritty feel which suits this kind of image, this black and white. It almost needs, you know, desaturation just a touch, and it's almost like a black and white but with a little bit of colour kicking through. That kind of suits really. Just turn the vibrance up a little bit. I quite like that. I mean, my instinct also would be to make it warmer. I'm just going to take the blue cast out a touch to give the whole thing a bit more of a feeling that the sky is influencing it. And now I feel that that's a bit green, so I'm going to just adjust that a little bit. I might also just add in a new mask, which is just the subject, which should just pick out the cottage for us. Let's have a look. Kind of. Let's add in the rest of it because it seems to have missed it. So then we're going to do that. And now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to increase the saturation on the house. And that should just make it stand out a little bit. So it's almost that kind of old-fashioned-y, one thing in colour, everything else in black and white, which I don't particularly like as a style. But it might work with this. It's brought that back to the colour it was and desaturated pretty much everything else. Let's get rid of that. Cool, okay. Let's get rid of the mask again. I'm just going to have a little zoom in and look round. We've got a load of stones here which are horrible, which people have been throwing, I guess. I've got two more areas I want to deal with. First of all, these two areas here. So there's one there, which has got some detail in it, so it will print okay, as has that one. But I feel like they're so dark, they're kind of detracting a little bit. So just going to put a mask on them, and I'll do that with, I could use a range mask. I think it's going to be just as good, you know, just to use a brush. And if you hit the square bracket, let's just turn the overlay on so we can see. If you hit the square bracket, you can make them bigger or smaller, but it does automatically select it if you have that control turned on. So I'm just going to, actually what I'm going to do is just going to raise the shadows a little bit with that just give us a little bit of interest in there so we can see what it is. And that stops detracting a little bit from the house. That's good. Okay, it's coming along. So I'm just going to create a little bit of contrast. We're just tweaking those a little bit. If we look at the histogram here, you can see down the bottom we've got these blue bits. That means that's that clipping that I've got turned on there. Look, that's telling me that's a black. And I've also got highlights turned on. There's nothing going on there, so the highlights are all fine. And that's the thing we used to worry about the most when printing, because they would go a horrible kind of see-through-y plastic kind of colour, but that's fine. So I'm just tweaking these very slightly. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right down to the bottom here. These other sliders we can use. So sharpness we normally do last. The next thing I'm going to do is the vignette, which is here. I'm just going to darken down the corners. If you can just see that's being affected. Just points us again more towards Lot's house. Okay. Not 100% convinced the expose is dead right. Let's just lighten it a little bit. We did more towards what the camera saw. Yeah. Probably something around there. I don't mind this bit up here burning out a little bit. That's all fine. Good. Okay. Right. The next thing I need to do, which I will speed up because it will take a while, is I'm just going to use the clone tool or the healing tool in Lightroom just to get rid of these bits of stone that have ended up on here. So I'm just going to click on it, and you can use the square bracket on your keyboard again to make these bigger or smaller. And it's just a question of pushing it over the stone, and most of the time it does a good job. I used to use Photoshop for this. Nowadays it does seem to do a good enough job, Lightroom, so that's probably going to work fine. So I'm just going to speed this up, but I'm going to be working my way through the image, or this bit on the image actually, to just get rid of these stones. So that bit of ice down there, I'll leave that. I don't mind that. It's the stones which look a little bit kind of messy, I don't like so much. So I'm going to get rid of those now. And there we go. Looks a lot better. A great job it's done. Okay, cool. Right, so looking at this again, and what I sometimes do is just press the L key on your keyboard. That means lights out, and it will just show you what it looks like. The other thing that's been recommended by Joe Cornish and Simon Baxter both do this. They rotate it, which we can do. So you basically turn it upside down to see how that looks. And that takes away the distraction of the actual picture and shows you more of the lines. The other thing you can do is, once you've shot it, put it on the display on the camera and turn the camera upside down so you can do it on location. And I have done that on occasion. This is showing me, I don't know, actually let's have a look. I almost feel like I need to take a little bit more sky and a little bit more off the bottom, which I can do upside down. That's absolutely fine. So that might work a little bit more, maybe with a bit more of the sky there. And that's also putting the cottage onto the thirds, which kind of works nicely. We've got a big 50 megabyte sensor on this, so that's all going to be fine. There we go. Let's just tweak that a little bit. Let's send it back again the right way around. That looks okay. So the last thing I need to do now is to just sharpen this, and the way I do that is we're going to choose something that we need to sharpen. So we're going to click on that bit, and I'm looking really at the roof here. That would be quite a nice thing to sharpen because we've got some detail in the roof, but we've also got this plain bit which will show me any artifacts that come in. So on the Mac, if you hold the Option key and then use this masking slider, look what happens. And I'm going to slide that up, and what this is doing, anything white will be sharpened, anything black won't be. So I can get rid of all this water, turn the mask up, and it's basically applying a mask to it. And that's the bit now that I've got. So if I look at that again, look, so I'm just going to sharpen those white bits, which are where the edges join. and the grasses, and that's perfectly fine. So let go of that. Hold the Option key for the sharpen, it turns it black and white, and then just have a look over here on the right hand side to make sure there's no artifacts creeping in a little bit, just about there. Normally around about 60 is what I normally choose, and that's sharpened, ready for print. So we're going to go ahead and print that. I'm just going to do, actually before I do that, I'm just going to make a copy of that, and I'm going to convert the copy, which is there. Just going to have a look at what that looks like as a monochrome picture. So if we go back down to some of these, if you've got a future camera, some of these are really interesting to look at. It's kind of that kind of classic pro neg look is what I was kind of looking at almost, but I think that's a bit too wishy-washy. I normally go for red, and actually that looks really nice. Now what I need to do with this is I always like my black and whites a bit more contrasty, so I'm just gonna whack up the highlights. Let's go back to the house itself and make that a little bit more contrast. We're going to add a little bit white into that, raise the highlights a little bit. I'm just going to lower the shadows a little bit, make that a little bit as if it pops a little bit more, maybe a touch on the exposure. Cool. Okay. Clarity is the only other thing I normally do with that. There we go. Actually, I really like that as well. So I'm going to print both of those off. Let's just get rid of that so we can see it. Lights off. You can have a little look. Good. Okay. Well, I'm going to print both of those out. Now, the black and white one, I'm going to print on Legacy Gloss because black and white seem to suit a glossy paper that I've got. I like that Legacy Gloss. It's really lovely. And the colour one, I'm going to print on a textured paper. So let me do that now, and I'll film them coming off, and then I'll talk to you at the end. So there we go. We've got the colour on smooth cotton, photo speed smooth cotton paper, and we've got the Legacy Gloss with the monochrome on it, which actually I think I prefer. I think this is my favourite of the two. So that might find a way onto my wall at some point. Monochrome is something I don't normally convert. I don't normally convert photographs to monochrome. That kind of lends itself to it really a little bit, and I'm glad I came out with it. The square crop certainly works really well, but monochrome is something I'm going to be looking at in a little more detail next week, where you'll find me at Blear Tarn in the Lake District. It was very rainy, and I went out with the deliberate aim of shooting black and white. So I'm going to share with you next week my top tips from monochrome photography. I hope you can join me. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. It'll be lovely to have you on board looking at my videos. Like the video, share it with your friends, tell your mates, and I will see you next Sunday, 6 PM. Thanks for tuning in.
Oh, I said about that rain not being too bad. Oh, it's now hailing. Still, at least we'll have some snow in the mountains. Right, back to the car.